Good morning again, Coffee Chat people. I just wanted to give a little bit of give some feedback on our last Coffee Chat meeting, which was a few days ago. And we had a smaller number of people there this time, which was good because we were almost getting a little bit too big to be able to have a good discussion. It's great to see lots of people there, but sometimes it's a challenge to be able to get everybody to have the opportunity to say what they want to say. But that's all right. We went around the room, and our topic, by the way, was on will. Anything to do with will, free will, any use of the word. It tended to go along the lines of the willpower to be able to move ourselves in a certain direction. So I guess you'd say that would be free will. Intention came up quite a bit, that the similarity between what our intention is and what our will is. And somebody mentioned something about brainwashing, which the way we were raised and the way we're trained and so on can affect our ability to implement our will. There was quite a bit of stuff shared, but I wasn't able to keep up with everything. Somebody said that it's a mind force, that it's tied to desire and belief, and it's an outward manifestation of the spirit. It's a ruling faculty of the mind. The purpose is that it's coming from the divine. Will doesn't act contrary to the mind. Will is powerless without belief. And we have free will. I think that's there as well. Somebody talked about prayer as being a willful expression to a higher power. Conscious choice. Somebody relayed that as will and conscious behavior. Mental choice. We have the ability to use will for anything, to drive us into destruction, to drive us to the point of building ourselves up as well. It doesn't seem to matter what way we go, the will is there. Somebody was questioning whether free will actually exists, but then I think he went on to say that that's a hypothetical sort of a theory or philosophical theory, because in practical sense we seem to have free will because we can make a choice to stand up or walk or whatever it is, right? Somebody mentioned that strong will is definitely a benefit. Intent and choice, once again, came in close. There were a few books, and I think there was a movie, I'm not sure what the reference was, but The Wolf of Wall Street. Maybe that was an example of strong will, I'm not sure. There was, let's see what else there was mentioned here. There were a few other things too, but I didn't take notes very well. I'll also talk a little bit about what I had to share, and anybody else wants to share what they shared in more depth, feel free to chime in. My point of will was, well, I'll just kind of go through, I guess, and see what you think. I think that will is very important for us to recognize, so that's where I want to start off, is we all express will, I would say, and we use the word a lot in our speech even. We say things like, if only he were willing. I will do this or that. Will somebody please open the door or close the door? And we'll ask questions like that. There's a famous saying that says, thy will be done. We also use the word will in terms of questions like, is so-and-so in her will? In other words, somebody writes a will for when they die, an expression of will. These are all subtle differences in the use of the word, but they have a similar, or they're from the same word, basically. What I want to talk about today is in terms of somebody's internal strength, if you will. And I would like to say that will, or our, sorry, that I see will as a fact, and that our lives bear testimony to that will. That's our biggest evidence. To me, will is what is expressed. It's stronger than intent, because intent doesn't necessarily have results. But what I found out is that even the word testimony, the first definition of the word testimony, is will in respect to what we've gotten. It's an expression of will. So I'm going to talk a couple of little stories here, just to hopefully be able to exemplify what I'm talking about here. There was a friend of mine years ago. He was actually a landlord of mine, commercial landlord, and I've changed his name just for the benefit of his, private life. I'm gonna call him John. And this guy was a heavy smoker. He smoked several packs a day. He drank. He didn't eat right. He was a somewhat honest used car salesman, but but he was easily angered. He had a temper. All these sorts of things. Wasn't healthy at all. And he had a brother who was a business partner of his, who was very similar. They worked in the same office, smoked together, drank together. And at one point, they were both in their early 50s. His brother was admitted to hospital for some sort of illness, and in a few days died. Now, this was obviously devastating to John. That was his brother, they were close, but also their business affairs were tied together. So everything landed on John's desk, so it made it even more stressful for him. But maybe compounding with the result of this stress was that, he was bothered even to the point where it affected his physiology on top of his lifestyle probably, and he ended up in the hospital about a year later with a similar diagnosis, not quite as advanced, and fortunately he was open-minded enough, John was, to be able to listen to advice he was given, which apparently his doctor told him, look, you better shape up, you better change your lifestyle, or you may not get to see your grandkids much longer. And this apparently was a huge message to John, because he loved his grandkids, from what I could see anyway, almost more than life. He just loved his grandkids. And that became a big motivation, which drove his willingness to do what it took. And he went from being a 3-pack-a-day smoker, a drinker, this anger, his eating, to a happy granddad. It was really quite revolutionary. It's hard to explain. In fact, one day I even saw him. I was standing in front of my business one day, and here comes John shuffling down the road. Why is that strange? Because he was the kind of guy, he'd never walk anywhere unless from his house to his truck or whatever. If he had to go get a pack of smokes at the end of the street, he'd jump in his truck and drive to the end of the street. So I yelled out to him. I said, John, what's wrong with your truck? And he turned around with kind of a smile and he said, there's nothing wrong with my truck. He says, I'm exercising. It's healthy for me. And he looked like he lost weight and everything. But I guess this is an example of motivation also, almost more so. But the motivation drove his willingness. So if, as an example in our lives, if we're not getting what we want in life, we can realize that probably we're not really willing enough. And it's just an observation. So that's the power of will. When the right why, you might say, is in place, the will is extremely powerful. The next story I have, or this is a hypothetical example actually, would be, say, this is a business card of somebody, but let's suppose this was a winning lottery ticket, and one of us has this lottery ticket in hand. And once again, hypothetically speaking, it's worth $2 million, but it has to be validated by some sort of a validation machine within 2 hours. It's clocked. The problem is that we're here in the Great Northern Plains, an area called Saskatchewan. It's minus 30 something. It's a heavy blowing blizzard. There's feet of snow. The advisory is out. Nobody leave their house. Everything is shut down except this machine is still working somewhere, but it's 2 miles away to get there in 2 hours. Think about it. Would you be willing to do what it took? Maybe call up a bunch of friends, get a rope, and tie the rope together and hang onto the rope and walk. Dress up in all the clothes you can. Offer them part of it. Those sort of things would go through our minds, wouldn't they? Because we would be willing to do what it takes. See, there's something behind will, I think, that leads up to will. First of all, I think there's a perception of problem. In John's case, it was the perception of not seeing his grandkids and maybe being able to participate in their lives. That was a problem for him. So it evoked a desire to be with them. And you can translate that into any example, including the example of the lottery ticket. Whatever somebody's problem is that might evoke the idea of more money. Develops a desire for it. But then there's a mental construct of that vision. And it's a mental construct which also has an emotional component. We can almost feel it. Imagine the feeling that John must have had for his grandkids. It was almost like a heart. His heart must have almost dropped when he thought he couldn't hug his grandkids anymore. There's a construct that takes place in a phantom world, an imaginary world, before the manifestation. And in the lottery ticket example, that imagination would have involved the planning process as well, of what to do with calling the friends, getting the rope, and all that sort of stuff. That would have to take place mentally before they actually walk there. There's this whole mental construct. But still, there's still no will to completely go through with it, because there has to be believability. That is absolutely powerful. In religious tenses, they use the term faith. And I think faith is even stronger. There's a guy in an ancient scripture who talks about faith being the substance of things unseen. There has to be almost like a substance to faith or belief. Otherwise, it's not real. If we don't have belief, the will cannot act. Because up to that point, it's just a daydream. And daydreams can be valuable. But unless there's believability, unless John could have seen a way, and probably had a lot to do with the doctor's assuring words that you can change, John. And if he was worried about doing all these things, the doctor could have given him assured words, this is possible. And in the lottery example, suppose you have 10 friends who'll say, yeah, we'll come out with you. We'll get that rope. We'll all dress up. We'll follow along. We'll all work together, and we'll get there. Once that elevation of belief and possibility takes place, then there's the will. And when there's will, there's action. And when there's action, there's results. To the extent that it is possible, of course, and to the extent proportional to the amount of will. Why is will important then? I would say it's because it is, to a great extent, directable. This great, powerful force that we have within us, as far as we're concerned. I'm not even talking about a greater sense of will. I'm talking at this point about our own free will, individually, that we have. It is directed, and it's a great power within. And when we're able to get on board with the power of that will, we make a difference in our lives and in the lives of others. Nice talking to you. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.